Good evening and welcome everyone to Slugs and Steins lectures from UC Santa Cruz. My name is Julia Doloff and I'm a member of the UCSC Alumni Council and one of your volunteer organizers for tonight. With me is Mike Reapy, one of the founders of this fantastic program and a former member of the Alumni Council. Before we get started today on what is Indigenous Peoples Day, we would like to provide UCSC's land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Ꭺန့Ꭺ-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amah Mutsun tribal band, comprised of descendants of Indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. Thank you. As many of you know, our Slugs and Steins series engages a UCSC faculty member in discussion with all of you, our alumni, friends, and family. We want it to feel just like you're back at UC Santa Cruz, sitting in class, but with a drink in your hand and without an exam. Before we get started, and since we can't see you, we would like to know where you are joining us from this evening and how many people are watching with you. Please take a moment to fill out a short poll that will pop up on your screen. And we will share the results after we've given everyone a moment to respond. Thank you to those of you who are answering those questions. We really appreciate it. All righty, so you should now be able to see the results and who is in the virtual room with you today. So tonight we will be tipping our steins with film and digital media professor Joseph Ꭺ브. Professor Ꭺ브 is a multifaceted artist, educator, and technologist, and an enrolled citizen in the Cherokee Nation. Much of Professor Ꭺ브's work is dedicated to the preservation and the promotion of the Cherokee language, seamlessly integrating it into technology and the arts. Professor Ꭺ브 is committed to expanding Indigenous stories and languages and ensuring their continuation in contemporary media and technology for future generations. This evening, Professor Ꭺ브 will talk about his efforts to preserve the Cherokee language through technology and the arts, including his creation of films and animations in Indigenous languages. We will discuss his work and latest narrative film, which is in the Cherokee language. We are very lucky to have Professor Ꭺ브 with us here today, and his talk is sure to be very interesting and inspiring. After the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. You can feel free to type in your questions at any time into the question and answer box. All right, does everyone have their steins? Wonderful, I've got your slug, Professor Joseph Ꭺ브.
All right, well, thank you all, and thank you everyone for being here. I wanted to keep it casual since it's a great opportunity for us to make this just a fun event. I present on this from time to time. I guess I'll start with a little slide so it'll be more interesting than just staring at me. Let me get that rolling here with share my keynote here. So I am Joseph Ꭺ브, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Ꭺhághliss-Ꭺဿ, the lightning paper and how it started. But before I get too deep into anything technical, I kind of wanted to give an overview of the 5 beats of Indigenous storytelling. And I think that's kind of important to start there. So as you guys all know, you will see that a lot of times people talk about the 3-act structure, but for Indigenous people, setting up the first beat is often setting up the theme in the country. And so for tonight's, talk and just going through, we're going to have a few questions about it. Maybe you guys will pick up a few things. I know that Indigenous viewpoints and knowledge is not mainstream. It's not really taught too much in educational settings at universities, high schools, junior highs. There's just a very little bit that's done. And over 87% of information taught to Americans is between the area of 1820 to 1890. So anything before or after that is sometimes feel foreign a little bit to a lot of natives or a lot of Americans about Native people. So let's discuss a little bit about that. So I come from Cherokee Nation. My mom's Cherokee, my dad's white, and I am from the Cherokee Nation. I'm calling in today. Actually, I'm at the Cherokee Reservation tonight. Um, but we originally were on the East Coast. And we were a place with a giant American chestnut. I don't know if you guys have seen any chestnut trees in the United States. It used to be a lot more prominent. It was one of our main food sources. And even some of these old pictures were after our removal. And these trees were huge. And if you've gone to Santa Cruz, you know about big trees, but there was a giant forest on the East Coast. A blight hit it after our removal, and most native people will say that, they removed us and they destroyed our ecosystem. And I think there's a lot of arguments to be made about that. And this is just one of the trees. So if you can imagine, in Cherokee Nation's time, this was getting whittled down until our very removal of, and this through treaties, we kept seceding land through the colonized groups. And this was us right before removal. And so my family was in this area, my mom's family, and right before we were in northern Georgia, right before we got removed. But most people don't think about this, but you guys all know the sequoia tree. It was actually named after a Cherokee man that invented our writing system and about this time. And so sequoia was so popular in his invention, and he originally wrote it with a cursive writing system. And why that's important is that a lot of preconception knowledge of this manifest destiny was the fact that people considered Native people primitive. And one of the reasons they did that is so that they could take over our land. Well, it wasn't quite true. In fact, during this time, Cherokees not only invented a writing system and adopted it and put it into a printing press, but Cherokees were the wealthiest people in North America. And soon after the invention, we had our own newspaper, and this newspaper was the most popular newspaper from the Americas in Europe. And this actually helps us later when my work comes into play because it basically a lot of the Europeans had heard of Cherokee writing systems and stuff, and so I could get meetings because people had heard about it, and I was trying to get tech companies to support us, and the Europeans knew who we were. But just it wasn't just writing systems. Cherokees basically had the market on steamships as well, and they were the shippers of all the different goods. So we were basically the modern trucking companies across all the rivers on the East Coast. So Cherokees became very wealthy through this system, and two, hiring white people for their employees, and this later became against the law to hire white people. They passed laws against Cherokees employing white people in the East Coast. But this is a house that stands even to this day. It's built by a German architect for James Van. And the Cherokees had great wealth, and they had modern and fancy homes. They had silks and all of that. Now, but we got removed, and at one point, now mind you, you don't grow up learning this information, and you don't have to go to boarding schools to have this knowledge. So I think this is a great time to do our first fun little question. Don't feel you have to get it right, but I love the first one. Who had the most economic wealth in the 1820s in the United States? Was it Georgia, Virginia, Cherokee Nation, or West Virginia? So there's a little question for you. We'll just keep this since I don't get to communicate with you all as much as I'd like. I thought that'd be fun to keep things up, and you can see how you do over the next little bit. Um, yeah, so this is fun. I hope you guys enjoy the poll. Georgia, of course, came in, and they were, putting a lot of things that were reporting. Oh, look at that. You guys did well. 97% said Cherokee Nation, which is correct. Even though we were wealthy, we did get removed anyway. And the red line is the majority of Cherokees went on that route. The blue one is the water route, which was devastating. They first started removing us in boats, and it cost so many lives due to disease outbreak and stuff that was happening on these boats that even the U.S. Army thought it was too rough. Then there's the Bell route and then the Binge route, and they were just two contingents on those two routes. But I digress to say we ended up after our removal from our homelands, and I worked on a film for the National Park Service at the time. And when I got out of grad school, I was hired to produce this film, and it was about being rounded up and removed to Oklahoma. This is Ꭰ噚Ꭺန့. It was his first film, and this is Natalie Standing Cloud. If you've watched Reservation Dogs, this was her first film. I was very proud that she was in this film. She was in other plays and stuff, but she got into this film. I think she was 13 at the time. Ꭰ噚Ꭺန့, it was his first film. He went on to make 5 more films. And if you look at this, the National Park Service actually told me they wanted someone that looked Indian. And so we had a big discussion about the fact that he was native. It was 4/4 actually, but I think they wanted someone that looked more pan-Indian, and Cherokees are not pan-Indian looking fellows, but we ended up removed, and we ended up getting into Indian Territory, which is that red section, and it's still Cherokee Nation today. And this is in the ᎠṕᎪန့. So the first thing that Cherokees built was universities and schools. As destitute as we were when we ended up in this place with very little resources and funding, what we did do is we built schools and we built universities. And Cherokees always valued education. We had Ivy League educating Cherokees since there was Ivy League schools. And so we rebuilt our education system. Unfortunately, oil was found in Indian Territory, and Indian Territory for a lot of colonial whites meant free land and free opportunity to exploit. The United States government didn't feel like the native tribes should have jurisdiction over whites in their lands, and so it was kind of a free for all for Native people. And until the Women's Against Violence Against Women's Act, people would come into Indian Territory and they could legally do, capital punishments, rapes, and all of that against Indian people. And there was a loophole there, and so until recently. So Indian, you probably heard of Killers of the Flower and Moon with Osage, but it happened to these other tribal nations as well. And in full disclosure, my white side of the family, my name is Joseph ᎠરુᎦᎪ, and ᎠરુᎦᎪ was a Swiss man that came to work on an oil rig in Oklahoma City on the first oil rig and died working on the oil rig. So I came from some settlers on my white side as well. There was a land run, and I don't know if you know much about the land run. Maybe you've seen that Tom Cruise film where they come and they go for the land run. But one of the problems is with land runs, um, you had to be white, and of course, Indians couldn't participate, and neither could minorities. And they gave away most of our land. They gave little sections of allotment land, and my grandparents got put on 2 small allotments. And then they started going into Indian boarding schools. They started taking children away from their homes. Now, why does that lend itself to my research? Throughout this stuff, this is what really matters. We were educated and more educated than whites. And then they took away our school system. And this is where it started to make it where education rates and wealth started to be disappearing. As soon as they did that, and they established the state of Oklahoma, we most people became poor. Most Cherokees became really poor. But even within that, we had printing presses, and as typewriters developed, Cherokees were there for typewriters. If you guys have heard of Will Rogers, he was Cherokee. He was born in an Indian hospital. He was a Cherokee person that lived in Cherokee Nation, and a lot of his ideals and values and humor comes from Cherokee culture. And he became the wealthiest paid actor of his time. And so we're pretty proud of Will and his legacy of kindness and humor. He said he never met a person he didn't like. And of course, for politics, we always he wasn't a part of any organized party. He was a Democrat. So, but just like most of the stuff, this should be a wake-up call to Santa Cruz and most of California. It doesn't take too many generations of colonial environment to destroy the entire ecosystem. And within, the statehood was founded in 1907. They were bringing in people in before that and taking and extracting oil and farming and all of that. But once Oklahoma hit, that people got land that didn't know how to use land, manage land, or farm land. And it caused an ecological catastrophe along with killing off the buffalo and the grasslands. It destroyed systems. And so all of that to say that I come into play here. Eventually, this guy named Steve Jobs paid this Herman Zapp a oops thing. He paid Herman Zapp a to design a font. Now, Herman Zapp was a famous font designer. It did not get into the operating system yet, but it was really interesting that Steve Jobs knew Cherokee. Later on, his wife was friends with one of our chiefs. But here is where my family is from. It is Ꭰˋ<silence> , which is black gum. It's a tree. Black gum trees are really pretty in the fall, about right now. And my family it was named after this tree because Cherokees, when they came here, they saw the tree and it became an area where a lot of cultural things happened, ceremonial grounds. And my family was up and around near all of that. And so here's my family. I wanted to make it fun for you all today. This is my grandma on the left here, my mom. My grandparents had a white parent and an Indian parent, and they ended up with some allotment land, and they were there. This is my son when he was born. My grandmother passed away not too long after this photo was taken. This is Durbin. He's my mentor. He helped teach me how to read and write in Cherokee. And this is my wife and my son. And this is my father-in-law, who was the first Native American PhD in social work. And he did things like the Indian Child Removal Act or the Indian Child and to fight against the Indian Child Removal Act and stuff like that that protected Native children from being taken away from Native parents. And so I have a long history of my community. These are different chiefs, Sterling Harjo from Reservation Dogs, my cousin Tommy, all of this stuff to say when I got into grad school, I was an artist and I ended up taking an animation class and I got into film and animation. And when I started this, can you imagine if you got on a computer and your language didn't work on it? That what happened is you had to do all of this in Photoshop. You had to draw it out. And so title cards took a while. In fact, one of these characters was discussion because we don't have a unified writing system. I had to change it and I had to go back many steps to fix the title card because after they sent it to me, I was working with my tribe and some elders, and then they said, "Hey, we want to change that one character." And so I had to adjust it and change everything because it wasn't on computers. And I came home, and this is back in the VHS days. And for some of you alumni, VHS is, we are of a certain generation. And this is me giving the tape over to the head of the council. These were both speakers of the language. And then I did this little short. Ꭰˋˋዄ, I'm hungry. It's such an old animation. And it was the first time I'd ever heard Cherokee on a screen my whole life. It was the most exciting thing I'd done in my whole life. And I got offered to stay at Penn. I was at the University of Pennsylvania in grad school. And when you do well in grad school, sometimes they let you stick around and teach a year or two. And they wanted me to stick around and teach computer animation. I was so excited. I moved home to try to teach some of my people back home how to do some of this stuff. And so I did. I worked 6 years in the communities in Creek and Cherokee schools. Creek's a neighboring tribe, where it's a nice tribe near us. And so I would go and we'd mainly, this is a janitor closet, and we would make films and with kids in the language. We would teach the kids because this generation wasn't learning. We would teach them how to do their lines, and then they would animate these traditional stories. Um, and so that's what we did. It was an exciting time. And so this is a creek made by kids. And at the time, well, let's do our question. I'll do a little quick question, keep you guys going. Be a good time to take a drink too. What is the first Cherokee animations title? Was it Old Ways, The Beginning They Told, Red Thunder, or Cherokee Beginning? And I will let you have a drink too. And don't feel you have to get all these rights. I don't worry about them as much as just keeping you engaged. Um, Also, this is one of the gourds while you guys are finished filling those out. I made this before smartphones existed. I was doing animations for the Cherokee Immersion School, which we just started, which is a school all in the Cherokee language. And we had these little iPods, and we bought iPods, and we basically would put them out there. Okay, good job. 52%. The beginning they told is correct. Good job, everyone. And yeah, so I realized that most people were thinking that Native people were slow. I remember when we were going to a powwow, a bunch of friends and I up in Tulsa. It's a big town near us, and uh, this guy was getting out his regalia, his stuff for his powwow, and his phone rang, and he was in full double bustle, um, something for a powwow, and when his phone rang, this older white couple started taking pictures of him like he was a um, and then I thought, do people think native people don't have technology? And then I started realizing many people didn't realize that our culture was still set in the past. And it was so strange to me to think about that. And I started doing artwork about our contemporary ways about it. And so I made this piece, and that's a flip phone I had at the time. And I started continue to make animations in the language for our children, and then I started working with tech companies to get our language on there. And this is our first, like I worked with these kids since they were 3, they were elders that were teaching them in the language. And I started working to run computers for them with some people. And we started a language technology department to try to address it. Designed a keyboard layout, started teaching kids how to do it. We weren't allowed to talk to the kids in English. We had to do it in the language. We were in big wikis and blogs and everything in the language. And this is in the Cherokee syllabary. It was a very exciting time because we'd never seen it. And so I got it really addicted to the idea to be able to pick up a thing of technology and not see English. And so localization is often what they call it. I was talking to Michael earlier, and like, when you localize software, you turn it into whatever local language it is so that all those things are able to do it. I didn't know what it meant. I was an artist, filmmaker, never heard the word localization. And then all of a sudden I started dealing with that. And one other thing that's important is I was still doing paintings, and I really loved the culture. And one of the reasons I thought the culture was so important is that, for the Iroquois group that we are, it's our language base, is like you don't guide people by telling them not to do something. You guide them by telling them good things, respect everyone, all that stuff. Our commandments are not about, don't kill people. It's respect all people, respect, you know, say uplifting words. And out by the fire, you're not allowed to say the words, negative words like don'ts or don't do or nots or no. You can only say positive stuff. So when an elder gets up there and talks to you, they're only able to say positive things to guide people. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that we were the first natives, uh, or actually first people in the United States west of the Mississippi with phones. And so I wanted to, show that we did that in a painting, that we had phones before most people. And of course, I started making fun things with contemporary work. I made superhero shows in the Cherokee language. This was kind of fun. I was in my 20s, and I was wanting to make fun things set in the future. And so I did. And I made this in a month. it was, it was like really quickly made. It was fun though. And of course, we were fighting to get our land back, and of course, we wore cowboy hats sometimes around here with eagles on them. And then I kept doing boards, and the iPhone came in, and we started having these kids on there, and I would make artwork about it. But then they had these little balls on top of like computers you could buy to do like this web chatting. This was new. And so I started doing that as well. And I started making copper work about that. And of course, we had to make little kids shows. But look at this. This is a big problem we had. We were doing those little iPods, and our font was designed from a typeface font from the 1800s, which was not based on important things like sans serif fonts, which was like all those little legs and stuff. Usually, if you notice, computer fonts are sans serif, so they don't have the little legs or things that blend in when it gets into these smaller screens. Well, we had to figure out what to do about that because you could hardly read this stuff when it got small. And then I started getting into font design. And this is the Eastern Band. We started doing these conferences. This is our first day. Our school thought that only they could talk Cherokee, that age, and no one else in the world could. But we were working with the Eastern Band, who are now that are in Cherokee, North Carolina, the remaining group that was there. And they started a school along with ours, and we hooked them up to communicate. And we started getting the teachers to be able to talk to each other. And one teacher was at another elder's house, and this woman was 94, and they had this 2 hour conversation. And mind you, I know we're so used to, especially after COVID, but this is the first time these two people had seen each other in 40 years, and they started talking all in Cherokee. And it was just the most beautiful conversation to me that we brought people together. And so we finally got on the iPhone. It took us 2 years of dealing with Apple, which we were really grateful that Apple worked with us. These are the kids. I had to design a lot of different fonts and learn about things, and I had to design keyboard layouts and strokes and all of this stuff to figure out what we could do. And we had to type up over 40,000 documents to make in Unicode-based thing to make it where we could do the autocorrects and things that were required for Apple. And we were early in the phone. We were in less than the 40s. So in 2010, that's right, 2010, we came out on the iPhone. And I'd flown to Silicon Valley a number of times and started working with a lot of different wonderful engineers and people. And um, luckily the Cherokees that came before us had a lot of influence, and so did our chiefs, like William Mankiller, whose wife was friends with the chief, which later on Steve helped approve my projects that we're going through. And I was really grateful, and I thought I was really important because I didn't know the stuff, half the stuff I told you before. I just thought like, oh my God, I make an animation, I'm making films in Cherokee. And look, I just got on this really cool device, and the iPhone was, the second iteration of it. And I thought, oh my God, I'm really advanced. But I didn't realize that Cherokees keep doing this stuff, and they keep making all of this stuff. This is myself showing Wes Studi. He's an Academy Award winner. Um, the iPhone and how to use the iPhone and how to use the keyboard. And he's got his drink, so it's a good time. Take a drink, everybody. He was, we were in actually Chili's here in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. He comes home for the holidays, and I was like, "Look, we just got on the iPhone," and it was an exciting time. But it made me really nervous, so I made a painting about it. And this one's called "Pregnant with Potential but Unsure of the Delivery." I have two pregnant women, and this person with a keyboard holding it, not knowing if anyone's going to adopt it. You have the sacred fire over one shoulder, and you have the city encroaching up here. And will we get this technology in time for our language to continue? Because so many people weren't speaking it anymore. And so I just got really scared. You always want to do this kind of stuff, and then it comes out, and then you're like, is it going to be any kind of help at all? So I made a series of paintings about it. I made sequoia shooting a gun of syllabary at a robot, which I thought was fun in copper. And then I started making ideas about maps, world maps in Cherokee. And I started putting Cherokees and other tribal nations on maps because we're not on anything. And so I also reached out to Facebook. That took a lot of time too. I reached out to all these companies. And mind you, when I did this, I had no cell service. I had no internet. I didn't have, I'd have to drive to town at Cherokee Nation to do any of this work. And when I drive home, I didn't have anything. So I was working with eventually Facebook and Apple, and like these are the kids in the schools, and we started doing digital books, and I had no internet at my house. And so we were doing all of these kind of kid shows. I was doing presentations at universities that would ask me to come in and we'd speak on it, trying to get awareness. We got Cherokee Nation's Cherokee Phoenix online with the language, which before we had to do just images. And for that time period of slow internet, it was really rough. I made, copper gorgets and armbands about it. Google reached out to us. I started working with Google to do the search engine in Cherokee. And that was an exciting time. We were the 51st language in that. And then font designers. I started getting invited to with my other colleagues in my tech group. We would go to font, what do you call it, conferences and speak on it. And then I'd run into these major font people, and they would start helping us design fonts. And then I started designing my own from handwriting samples. And it was so exciting to do the glyphs and figure them all out. I was making fun stuff like for the little flower ones for the little girls in immersion schools, and then like a Tron one for the ones that like tech stuff. And I made paintings about this as well. And mind you, I was making films and animations. I got on the Unicode Consortium board and I started helping other Native groups get through the process. But I'd make copper work about it in that and discuss all of that in this crazy world that I was living in. And so I wanted to put the fonts on everything. I wanted the language to exist. And then people started to adopt my fonts that I didn't even know. So this guy started using it in some comic books he started making because now you could make books in it. And so people started using it again. And, we had to come up with technologies, ᎪháᎪsé̪, which is called lightning paper, which is what we call Gmail. And it was so exciting to be able to start working with this. Before Apple, we went to Windows because Cherokee Nation uses Windows more than Apple because they're a government agency. And they wouldn't work with us at first. But then after we worked with all these companies, they called us back. We did Windows. I started doing maps too, and started doing the world in Cherokee. And I wanted the whole world and local communities all in the language. And it just went on and on. We started getting to deal with the fact that our waters now, 90% of the water in Cherokee Nation is now impaired. So I started making stories about it. This is my mentor, Durbin, who taught me how to read and write. And so I made an animation about that. I made star stories. And then I ended up running this program that had been going on since '84 about the removal. And there's me in the middle, but we would take young people 1,000 miles along the Trail of Tears. And I mapped out the entire journals that were written at the time on this so that we'd read them and we'd have people read their own family's journals if we had, people on that ride. And I continue to make films and animations. And this is for Kyle Bell. He's a director. I started making video games because I wanted the video games to be in the language as well. So I started learning how to do that. I kept making animations and I do 3D animation, but I wanted some very flat style like paintings. And of course, I got Academy Award winning actor Wes Studi in this one, and this is about a contemporary one set in today's time, and so that was fun. Goes back and tells traditional stories. Oddly enough, Cherokees are not the only tribe in Oklahoma. There's 38 other tribal nations here, and they built one of the largest Native museums in the country. And I was asked as one of the artists to compete against a couple other artists for this giant copper wall. And I did, and I was selected. And so I did this Indigenous Brilliance peace. And oddly enough, as the world is, um, it's where the museum is set, and the native people that worked to get that museum cleaned up the place where the first oil site, it's called the oil rig number 1 in Oklahoma City. That's where my white side, my great grandfather, who I carry his middle name, or my middle name is his first name, died. And so right where that is, in that museum is where my great grandfather died. But here's a great time for questions. Um, all right, who is the first Native American to receive an Oscar? Is it Adam Beach, Will Mankiller, Wes Studi, or Joseph Herb? And I won't give you a hint, but it's not me. And so but it was exciting to be able to live in this space and to be selected. And the people that curated this museum were Native people, and it's it's like a whole group of different Native people chose me to represent the opening of the museum, and I was very honored to be that. I feel like it's one of the most internationally known things I've ever done. And so when you go into this giant museum, Wes Studi, that's great. Yes, I'm sure. Wilma did make a few movies, not as an actress, but they made some movies about her, and she was involved a little bit. And then Adam Beach certainly deserves an Academy Award. He was in Smoke Signals, and that was a great film as well. So after working with Google on the maps, I got invited out there at a conference, and within just what is it, 5 short years in a Supreme Court case, I got Cherokee Nation and 9 other nations on Google Maps, which was a big deal. And of course, I had help on every project. It's not just me. I got lawyers involved. I called the tribe. I was worked at the tribe when I started, and so all of that. Yeah, we're on Google Maps now, and this was an article out on CNN that came out. And this is Apple Maps as well. So you can see that Apple Maps and Google Maps, this is on my car. This is exciting to see Cherokee Nation on that. When you're left off of maps, and if you look on Apple Maps is a little bit more extensive. If you travel around the country, you can see a lot of different indigenous nations through Apple Maps. It's a fun thing to see that indigenous nations are still here. It's exciting to me. And now I flew out when we went and thanked Apple and Google this year in January with the chief and some of the administrations from my tribe. And Apple has built a group, and there's a small group team that actually is designing keyboards for indigenous languages, which I'm very thankful for. There's not money in this for that tech company to do, and it's nice when they actually do some social good for some of that stuff. And so I know it's a big deal for all the different groups that do that. When you see your name on a place that you never thought you'd be included in on, it's really amazing. Indigenous culture stuff. Oh yeah, let's answer that. Um, are you gathering ideas from many indigenous cultures, art styles to develop your own art style? I usually stick with the Southwest style, which is like where I'm from. Um, and so mostly I do Cherokee or Muskogean style artwork on that. That's a good question though, because cultures are so different. There's over 500 uh, tribes in United States, so quite a few. Does your language have any relation to Egyptian that you know? Not that I know of, but the writing system from that cursive writing what came from 3 different foundries, and we basically have an English style looking font, some Greeks and Russian styles, and then we have about a third of it just made exactly for our lesson. Basically, it was for taking our cursive writing and try to transcribe what kind of looked like our cursive writing into a block print so that we could do a printing press. And so I'm now making a film, a live action film with some people here. It's in post right now. It's a little slow on post. I'm working with elders to get all of that transcribed for the editors. We're using one of the great editors of our time, Kevin Nolting, a Banana Slug alum as well. to help us on that. We have Wes Studi again on this, and these are my friends that I get to see. It's kind of like the strangest things. Like I get to shoot films, and these are the people I care about. So in the red here is Anna. Lois is down here. Abraham's from my community. Dennis Sixkiller is actually a radio personality in our community. And this place with a green robot, which is going to be replaced with our digital CG robot. We have an elder living with an AI robot, will be replaced. But that's my house, and I shot in my house. Wes Studi, like I got to shoot in my community. I got to shoot around the tribe. I got to shoot at the tribal gym, and it was so much fun, and it was so great to like be able to do that. The yellow, that's my son, waiting in the clinic for the scene. And I have to say this has been a really fun shoot. It's basically an idea of elders living with a robot, and with through diabetes and the loss of his family. We lost a lot of people during COVID. He lost his family in COVID, the fictional story here. And he's able to build a relationship with a robot, which is kind of a really fun piece. But let's do one more question here. In our 5-beat narrative, I'm going to review this. Okay, what year did the iPhone for the Cherokee language happen? Was it in 2006, 2010, 2015, or 2022? The tough one. And so, but boy, when it came out, it was a big deal for me when the iPhone hit. And the iPhone was so new. Used to, we loved smartphones when they first came out. We all wanted one, and now we just need to learn how to put them down more. And so, but when it came out, it was exciting because what it does for us in our community is it allows our language to continue. My wife can send me something if I'm at a store and tell me more things that I need to get. And I'm at the grocery store, we can ask each other questions, and it's another opportunity to use our language. And so look at you all. You guys are fantastic. So it is 2010. It was the 4.1 release on that. And then when it hit news, we did a press release on the 23rd of December. We were in 600 newspapers the next day, and that was a big deal, and went around the world. And it was a big deal for us as a community to have this happen. But first beats, we're moving toward the end. So, we've had a lot of stuff happen in our time and our journey, from removal to the degradation of our language, our culture, our land, from Dust Bowls. And what is that moral, that fifth beat? Like, how are we going to do that? Resolve the theme. And I think that whether we, as Cherokee, are this, it's like the beginning they told, the first Cherokee animation made. Um, Whenever there's a big problem, we come together and we find solutions, and we work with outside people and inside people. And in this story of the beginning they told, and you can always Google the beginning they told Cherokee and watch that 22, 3-year-old animation. Um, they come together to build another land. They run out of land on this sky vault, and they build another place to live. And they do it together. And I think that's what happened here. Is we used what our ancestors gave us from writing systems and all of that to build a way to use our language and to be together. And so this is my community. And on Indigenous Peoples Day, it's hard for me not to cry a little bit to see some of these people. Some of them are gone, but they really did a lot, to work with me, to do the work, to like make it happen, to build this, to fight for sovereignty. Sterling Harjo has been very helpful. And if you get a chance to watch FX for Reservation Dogs, I recommend you guys do that. But yeah, so even today, like my wife, she's in the green. She started a program. They said something about, like if there's nonprofits, you can highlight them. So this is a nonprofit program, and so like for me, this program is the most. My wife started it for our son, so he could be a speaker. And by the time we got funding for this program, he was too old, and so she kept working really hard at it to get these babies to be first language speakers, because we haven't had first language speakers in like close to 50 years. So, yeah, so I just thought, nonprofit, someone mentioned if I wanted a nonprofit, this is a nonprofit. It's called Cherokee Little Seeds. And of course, if I'm raising money, I'd probably say, hey, donate to the UCSC. It's a great place. We have a lot of reasons. Education's important and all of that stuff. But if Indigenous Peoples Day, you know, has you motivated for that, this is a great program as well. And these kids are learning their language as their first language, which I didn't have the opportunity to do. And so I'm very proud of my wife and all the different elders that work with her to train these children to do that. And so that's it, people. I really do appreciate all you do. And I'm going to answer another question here, but thank you guys very much. Michael, do you have anything, any advice coming forward?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph. Just a reminder to the audience, this is a great time to start asking your questions. You can just type them in the Q&A box at the bottom. I'll start with one of mine, maybe, and I'll try not to make it an easy one. Oh, there's a request from Diana. If you could put the donation slide back up for a little bit, people can get the contact information or the donation slide. Yeah. So let me throw you not a softball question. I think I think your story is remarkable. You've had quite a trajectory and quite a resume. And I think it's really interesting. You show how an artist can and a social activist can get involved in technology and make a difference. If you want your language and on the iPhone, it's not going to happen if somebody doesn't ask, right, and push it along. I remember you telling me that Cherokee is one of the most difficult languages out there. I think you said it's like a 5 on a scale of 5 on the scale of linguists. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the language. What's the structure of the language? What makes it so difficult? And how do you map the language onto a font, which is maybe best, the idea of a font and characters are kind of a Western concept, right? So how does the keyboard work and the design of the font?
Yeah, so we have an issue with the fact that we have 86 characters and you have to make it show up where you can get to them all quickly so you can type fast. And so so I'll start with the complicated part is that we're a tonal language, and the tonal language is also a synthetic language. And so you have to hit the tone right, and it also combines words, and we conjugate everything almost. So for example, the word big is conjugated to. And so all of those kind of issues occur. But yeah, it's the UNESCO language, international language things rates it as a 4, which is there's only a 4 level. And we are one of the hardest languages to learn. And I wish it was easier. I'm not fluent in the sense that I could tell you everything. I've worked, most of my adult life learning, and it's been really a joy too, though, because you learn so much in the language, and you learn how to think differently. And Cherokees have a really kind way of thinking, and but the keystrokes are really interesting too. Tonal language is one where written part follows the phonetics. Yeah, so the problem with tonal languages on this is we don't have any tone indicators in the writing system. Sequoia never developed them. And so you just have to know, just like that store, STORE, is not story. And that's what gets a little bit confusing, especially. And I would say this too, there are people in these companies now that are looking to make sure that all Indigenous languages are being represented well. And we never had that when I started. We really pushed, we gave presentations, we brought children, we brought elders to do this kind of stuff. And then, personally, I had to learn, and I'm not like, when I say I had to learn, like I've had to learn coding, and I'm not a great coder. I've had to learn font design, keyboard layouts, and how keyboards are designed through keystrokes. So it's, yeah, much more intricate than I planned. But when you have a mission, it makes the whole thing a lot easier.
Fascinating. Thank you.
So we
The
do have
internet. Oh,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
was
I'm
just going
sorry.
to read that question out loud for everyone.
Yeah,
So yeah, so are you or anyone you know working to advance internet access in these underserved communities, especially in California, where we have the Department of Technology, which has apparently a lot of money allocated by the federal government?
I am not. They started doing it here. President Obama started it, and I went down for the initial launch of it, where they started funding for it. They He announced it in Choctaw Nation, and the writers from that removal ride and myself were invited as some guests to that opening. But I'm not involved in the technology stuff. What I would say is I was surprised that how many doors you can open when you try. I I I tried to do this stuff and I just kept doing it until I would find the right people to open the next door open. And eventually, with no tech connections, Steve Jobs was approving all of our stuff. Once, we got turned down by some tech companies, we went to the other ones until we got big enough where everybody would took it seriously. Yeah, because somebody has a mic on.
That might be me. We have a question from Jack. Have you worked with other Indigenous nations to help them with their language digitalization?
I have. Let's see. We're on Osage land, and Cherokees and Osage have had a rough history. And so the Osage Nation, although we get along fairly well these days, I felt obligated to help when the Osage Language Department called me and asked how did we do it. They have their own distinct writing system too. And so I got them in touch with Michael Everson, who wrote the Unicode document over 300 pages so that they could get their first step into it. And then I walked them through the process of getting through Unicode and getting adopted into tech companies and all of that. As the tech people that I eventually met walked me through it. And I've written articles about it. And so if you Google me, there's some articles out there that walk through the process because I didn't know how to do it. No one knows how to do it. There's not a place to really like, oh, here's how you do it. Like I had to go find the right people, and there was like all these steps, and it was like a mystery. And then when I when I started walking the Osage with it, they said the same thing I did when in the middle of the process. I was like, how am I supposed to know this stuff? And the Osage asked me the same thing, like, and I was like, I know how you feel. And so I started writing articles about it so other groups could get through as well. And then like I reached out on the Hawaiians. I did some um, relationship building on that. And then once they started happening and they started to include it in, now I think it's, has a mind of its own well beyond me, which is wonderful.
That's fantastic. So our next question, Rex says it's astonishing how many things you have accomplished in so many different areas, which is absolutely true. How many other people that you know of are doing similar work, maybe for other tribes, maybe for Cherokee Nation?
Oh, I always want to predicate like I was able to be successful because a lot of people helped me. I had a lot of training from tech people teaching me how to do Python coding. Like, and I was like, I don't know how to code anything. And then like they would walk me through it and I learned how to do that. And I'm still terrible comparatively to like people that do that all the time. But I would learn how to do certain things until I could get what I needed to do, just like video games and things like that. When you're starting to program, what you do is you learn those, you learn what you need to know to go to the next stage. There are other people doing stuff. There's some great art and animation and films by like Jonathan Thunder. And then you have people more on the artistic side of things that are making work. Not only like people like Sterling, but you also have artists that are developing like what's his name from 1491's. You have like Alex Redcorn and different people that are working on different texts. Let's see who else. Emerson does some great films, but one thing that I think is great about all of this is that now that a lot of this is made, you don't really need someone like me anymore. Like people could now specialize. Like you can be a font designer in Cherokee, and you don't have to worry about trying to get that in the program. And you can, design a video game, and you don't have to worry about Cherokee glyphs working in a program. Most software companies are starting to, include us in some of this stuff, so that Cherokee works, in Unity. So you can use, it for coding and stuff. It works in Python. And so this is what's really great about being included in Unicode and stuff. And so we're really seeing another evolution of people being able to be more isolated. I really wished I could have just been a filmmaker and an animator and did something more specific like that. I didn't want to have to design over 40 fonts, but I did. Um, and I didn't want to go through handwriting samples for over 2 years and make fonts out of handwriting samples so that we could get more and more inclusion. But now, um, yeah, now you don't have to do that. You can get specialty people that love fonts to do that. And the other day, I saw a young person and they're doing fonts, and they're doing beautiful fonts. And I don't think he's an artist at all, but he loves fonts and he's doing them. And I saw another person and they're doing some really interesting fonts as well. And that's what they do. And before there was like a jack of all trades situation where I had to learn how to do something to go to the next stage. And so I feel very honored that I got to live in the time that I've lived so far. But I'm looking forward to finishing my film and doing more films. And there's some fonts stuff. I'm still in contact. There's a certain fonts that I want to get developed with some of the tech companies that I'm still working on. But in general, I try to, there's some really ideas of story and why it's important to do indigenous narrative structure for the environment, and the relationships we have, I think, are important. So I'm dealing with that in software that converts written documents in Cherokee to audio files. That's a very good question. So there is some beginning process for text to speech in Cherokee, but it's because of the tonal language, we haven't quite got it. I've been talking to Kim Silverman at Apple some. He's amazing. But being a tonal language, it's going to take a lot of years to develop. So it's still in the initial stages, because often when you say stuff in Cherokee, you have to hit the tone right or you're saying something completely different. And yeah, that's really challenging for us on the text to speech, but I think we'll be there someday. Let's go in Cherokee.
Thank you. There's a question from Jack. I struggled in school with English due to dysgraphia. Cherokee seems like a nightmare for people like me. Do you see this with some of the kids?
Yeah, so, well, I don't talk about this a lot because I've been pretty successful not having to disclose it, but it's a fairly simple thing. I have some dyslexia as myself, and I've, never, I've been fortunate enough to not have it bad enough where it's affected me, to not be now associate professor, but certainly when our eyes get tired and stuff, it's difficult. And in Cherokee, it can be tough. And I've designed fonts in Cherokee dealing with that kind of issue, so things don't turn on you, because we have a J this way and you turn it this way and it's a da, so it's a Jew or a da, and flipping it does change it. But we've dealt, there's fonts for that. I designed some fonts dealing with some of those issues, and I always recommend for people that have that, any issues with that there are fonts that help address some of those things, and certainly we're trying to do that as well. Any other tribes that share your language, or are they much different? So most tribal groups are very different. So for example, English is as different, or Cherokee is as different to Navajo as English is to Chinese. So these are really different languages and cultures. Like these are really different. And so there's Muskogean language near us that we're surrounded by Muskogean people here in Indian Territory where we got removed to. But we're Iroquoian language. And so they are very different, and they do have a lot of fundamental things. So like the Chickasaws have a level 1 language, so it's much easier to learn so they have language preservation, yeah, that is a lot easier. So I so wish we had an easier language to learn, but you have what you have, and I wouldn't want to wish away our intensity. Can you talk a little bit more about the 5 beats of Indigenous storytelling? Yeah, I think it's really crucial. I think one of the things that I would say, I guess I'll do a quick summary of what I don't like about Western media and why I think the 5 beats is important. The Western media stuff, because it comes from a culture that has left their place to come here in this short period of time, they don't have a very centralized understanding of place. And that's why I believe personally that the environment keeps getting destroyed, because their stories and places don't have the importance that your great grandchildren are going to be here. And whatever you destroy is, you've destroyed your great grandparents' work. Those giant trees, those were cultivated by Cherokees to make them that big and to take care of them all those thousands of years. They didn't cut them down. They had the ability to cut them down. They didn't do that. They had an ecosystem. And so the 5 beats talks about this idea of place, environment, and values as you start to deal with this. And so it's not about trying to shove ethics about it. It's about the idea of allowing a culture to be developed and understanding. So like we talk about the 7 generations model, that what we do affects 7 generations, and what you guys do affects 7 generations. So when you make a decision, what you do is you make the decision knowing that it's going to be 7 generations down the road, and you will make good decisions. You'll make better decisions if you keep that in your mind. The 5 beats addresses some of that in the openings and the ending, to understand that whatever the ending of that story is, it's just a prologue. It's just the beginning of something else in our stories. And when you can train students this understanding, not only the 5 beats, but this understanding of what does it mean to make a piece of work, and where is it going, and what is that idea of what it causes society. I think that you make different work that way. For example, our work has got a lot of anti-hero stuff in it. And I'm not a super moral, like crude person in any way. I mean, give me a drink or whatever. I'm cool. Let's party. But I'm saying that with this, we need to be very cautious with what we make and what we do together. And when we make something like reality TV shows that have like these problematic characters, you could get one as president. And the reverse of that, if you make really important stuff where people understand that people matter in what we do, and it doesn't mean you have to have this like, this Puritan idea of values, because certainly you don't have to have that to tell that someone's moral. Our morality is a little bit more complicated. It's not about this like giving up stuff to like be a good person. It's more about like thinking about longevity issues. And so 5 beats to me really gets into that. It's what I'm dealing with this Redbird and the Robot piece, showing the culture is thought about. In the very end of this film, he actually he talks to the robot about this, about his family. And so it basically allows this ability to have a better understanding of the environment and yourself as we go. But anyway, I know we're running low on time, but thank you guys so much. And I hope, you certainly reach out. Thank you for supporting UCSC still and the value of everything.
I think we still have some time for some additional questions. Can go until 8 o'clock or so. I'm wondering if Kevin's question just also has a way to, if you can contrast the 5 beats of Indigenous storytelling with what you typically see in a film. Not all of us are film majors. Is this how is this similar and different to what we see every day on the screen?
So I would say this is like, it's not like Indigenous narrative structure is really not that much different than other cultures, in the sense that what's different from it is from the Western American influence of media, and you could argue that the United States media wings and arms for many reasons is one of the most powerful cultural like tools across the world. And how it's different is that what we have to do to actually address that is that a place-based story is a better story. And starting with place is important. And what I would say is, you know, if you can train people to do it, documentaries have more meaning when you understand the history of what that happened there. So, for example, if you understood the Osage history, you would understand why, um, you know, tribal sovereignty is so important. Why it's unfair for these oil companies to continue to get wealthy when they are built upon the blood of indigenous people. In Oklahoma, if you know the history here, um, most of the wealthiest families in Oklahoma, which are billionaires, would adopt children and kill their parents. They'd kill their parents in the night, legally adopt them, send them off to boarding school. And the wealthiest family did this thousands of times. They were mass murderers. And their grandchildren are billionaires in Oklahoma now. They're old billionaires. And they say, well, I didn't do it. But, and so across the United States, we have the issue with wealth. And, and I would say this is like, if you address that stuff, you can fix the solution. And it's not about like completely like just trying to impoverish other people or turning everything on the head, but you can actually make better documentaries when you understand why that is. Because a lot of times people will see a native person and they're like, oh, look at they're uneducated. They seem lazy. But you don't understand like the complexity of native people is that we're not lazy when we're wealthy, like many times people are highly educated and have been. And so if you've seen someone downtrodden in a situation on film or screen, um, it's probably not telling the entire story of the dynamicness of that person. And I think the five beats would address some of those issues throughout that for any culture that comes in. And just like different regions of the United States are culturally different, it would address those things as well.
We do have someone who has a question. What is next on your horizon, and what are you currently working on with your students at UCSC?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I'm finishing that piece. I'm trying to do a documentary about the Little Cherokee Seeds program, and that one's always challenging. My poor wife is always fighting to keep that place going and funded. Um, you know, for Native people, our language is really crucial that it continues, and that one's important for me to make that documentary for that, especially for the purpose of making people aware. Indigenous cultures and languages should continue, and I think we all, Indigenous or not, have an ethical obligation to try to make sure that occurs. And um, I remember when I came back from school, I watched 20 native languages die in Oklahoma, and I don't want it to happen to my community. And so it's at risk of dying, like all the native languages. Even Navajos are now getting um, fewer people are speaking it in their younger ages now. They're starting to see it. They're 20 years away from where we're at. But then there's other groups that they have two or three speakers left. And so for me, making work about that, making work in the language, I want to do one about a magician too, a narrative piece, and have some fun with that and deal with some water quality issues too. Usually my fiction has fact in it and my facts have fiction. So I'd like to mix it all up a little bit in the sense that I think that you can tell a really honest story in a narrative. And so I try to do that as well. So I'm currently working on my second episode of Rabbit Stories, and I have to do a third one after that. It's also funded by Cherokee Nation. I'm excited. I'll be back on campus teaching some fun classes coming up in the winter quarter, and that'll be exciting. I do love teaching I think it's important. I come from a clan. You get your clans from your mom. In your clan system, there's 7 Cherokee clan systems. I'm on Niggalon, which is one of the teaching clans. So I love teaching. I come from teachers, my mom's teachers, my aunts, my great uncles. Yeah, and I'm excited to teach, and I'm also excited to keep making work. I'm working with this one piece. We're trying to finish up with our assistant editor soon in the next week or so to get it to Kevin. I'm excited to work with Kevin Nolting, an alumni here. He's a very amazing editor, but just a wonderful person. I'm looking forward to finishing that piece.
Wonderful. We've got a really good question from Enrique here. I'm gonna have to. I'll read it. It's a bit long, but I don't want to edit anything out. You shared that you made a video of a creation story. I'm wondering if the creation stories indigenous religions are gradually being reinterpreted to adapt to the new realities of technology and scientific advancements. An example is the interpretation of one Christian author through a perspective of artificial intelligence technology that one may soon be able to create digital souls of people and resurrect them in android bodies. Perhaps that is too far out, but the last image you briefly shared was in silver color and had what I think are computer motherboard designs. Stories change through time.
Yeah, and I certainly think they do change, and it'll be interesting to see how this next evolution goes. There are certain things that I haven't done in stories. For example, seasonally, you tell certain stories, and you don't tell those stories any other time. So I haven't done some of those yet because I haven't been able to get them where I'm comfortable in making those stories where I know they'll only be told in winter, or I'll only know them told in spring. Um, but yeah, the technology's out there. One of the things is like I made the beginning they told, um, 20, I started like what, 24 years ago or something like that on it. And I didn't truly understand it until recently how much it meant that when a crisis happens, you come together and you bring a group together to find solutions for the problem. There's nothing in the story that tells that. They just do that. And although some of the stuff comes to me quicker, I think that if you tell the story with these components fairly, people will keep interpreting them in other ways and find truth in them. And I think that it'll be really exciting to see some of this stuff. I'm excited. Like some people are really scared of AI. And what scares me about AI is a colonial capitalistic value system being put in that. But the technology itself, if it had like indigenous designers and older cultured people that put value in how things integrate, I would be less afraid of any of it because I think that value systems that value everybody and everything and every plant would be beneficial. And I think that, even American society is starting to realize that they don't know everything in some cases. I've found a lot of hope with a lot of tech people in Silicon Valley. They're working, they're giving their lives to make the next tech work well. And many times when I would show up and I would tell them the ideas that I wanted to do or implement, um, they would work on it. And they didn't have to. And like they were already working late at night and they would have to work later to do an extra project. And they would do that. And it gave me a lot of hope in humanity that we have people out there from all different cultures wanting to do good. Our next goal is to try to make sure the technology is built upon that kind of principle, and it doesn't mean that you need a Judeo-Christian backing. You need the idea of the values of all being important, and that everybody has a right to exist in whatever form they are. And I think that a lot of indigenous and older cultures have that, and I hope that that continues in that things. But I do find some hope in some of this stuff, and I do find that these stories will change some. And I'll be excited to see what Cherokees make in 50 years. I hope I'm around for that. It'd be interesting to see what my son makes, or if he has kids, what they make in this new technology. And you're right, the circuit board, by the way, was Cherokee designs meshed with circuit boards. Because I took Cherokee iconography and mixed it with circuit boards. There was a class to learn how to do copper etching and copper metal work from traditional Cherokee folks down the hill, and I didn't have enough money to take the $250 class, so I watched YouTube videos on how to etch circuit boards, and so I just built it into my designs. So
Wow, thank you. So we do have another question. How do you feel animation as a medium differs from live action filmmaking for Indigenous storytelling?
great question. So this is actually really interesting. When you make animation, you build the entire world. There's nothing taken for granted. Space, time, place, everything you decide. When you use a camera, a lot of the camera decides what's on it, what's in front of it, all of that stuff. So that what happens is, and why it's really important to have community input, is that, and I think you're going to deal with the same problem with AI, is that bias gets in there. And so when community people make the work, for example, when I was out teaching in the community, eighth graders in this place called Hannah, Oklahoma, made the most Creek animation I'd ever seen in my whole life in Creek language. And the guy who was in the story looked like their principal. Like everybody's Creek, of course. Everybody, Creek, racially Creek. And but it was amazing because they had to build the backgrounds, the foregrounds, the houses, the where the line is. And if you know this as an artist, you'll notice that people in like Santa Fe have a lower horizon line than people in mountainous areas. So artists make horizon lines different. Well, you find that in the animation as well. So people make the whole world in animation. They have to do it all, and especially for the 2D work and even some 3D work, you find it much more personal. And so I love that aspect of animation. It's a lot of work. I've been doing animation for a while now, but yeah, I think it becomes much more personal in animation that you can't take anything for granted.
Let me take the moderator's prerogative. I'll ask the final question here, but you've shown us a lot of fascinating stuff here. You've got paintings, you've got pottery and gourds and films and animations. Where can we see your work? Where can we see your films? Where can we see your paintings?
Oh, yeah, let's see. Of course, there's some in the galleries and stuff, and then um, I have josepherb.com. JOSEPHERB is my website. You can go there. Some stuff I don't have on there because I don't always, you take money, you don't always own it all. And, it's what the reality of the world. You can see that some of my work's on YouTube on different places. Cherokee, you can Google Cherokee animations and my name. Stuff shows up on Cherokee Nation's website. Different places have different stuff. The First American Museum, I have that big giant copper mural in the opening. I always recommend that one's a great one because you get to see so many great work in that museum. It's such a big place. It's run by Native people. It's designed by Native people. It's a really unique experience, and it's got a cafe there, and it's Native food. It's in Oklahoma City. That one's really cool. If you ever get in the middle of America, it's a really neat place to be as well. So,
Thank you. Julia, do you have any final questions from yourself? Or?
I think just the one question I had was just since you've been able to help get the Cherokee language in technology, when you're back at the reservation in Cherokee Nation, have you noticed that more people are using it? That the kids who are learning it through some of these programs are, kind of able to speak it to each other, like outside of school? Like, how have you seen it hopefully improve in terms of the numbers of people using it?
yeah, so we've got a complex issue. Like we're losing speakers faster than we're replacing them. But the young people are using it a lot, and it's so much easier for documents and newspapers. Let's see. Oh, yeah, look at this. So cool. This is that's where, oh, it's a background. Anyway, it's like the Cherokee Phoenix in the Cherokee language. It is so cool. Let me turn off my let me turn off my background here. Let's see real quick. Believe me, it's worth it. Just wait for a second, please. Let's turn off that background. You'll see my boring room. But it's like, it's a newspaper, people. And I know that doesn't sound like much. Oh, but look at this. And there's a book I illustrated on it. I didn't mean to do that, but it's all in the Cherokee language. Like it's about mushrooms and all of this stuff. There's the removal that we're talking about this year's ride. And to me, what's really exciting is it makes it so easy to do now. Like before, it took so much work just to make a title on an animation. It took so much work to make one article in a newspaper, just one, because you could only type it on this fake looking font, which wasn't Unicode compliant, on one computer. And now we're making movies in it, and titles and subtitles, and it's on every computer out there. It's on my iPhone, it's on your iPhone, it's on your Android. Like it's phenomenal, and it just makes me really excited, because when I started, none of that happened, and I got to work with a lot of great other Cherokees and non-Cherokees to be able to have this happen.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. That is amazing. It must be feeling of accomplishment, I think, to have had that big effect over the length of your career. It made such a big difference. Let me just read a few final remarks here. As Julia mentioned before, my name is Mike Riepe. I'm one of the volunteer organizers of Slugs and Steins lecture series. Please join me in thanking Professor Joseph Ꭰૃ for sharing his work with us. I know I learned something new. I gained a really new perspective this evening, and I hope all of you did as well. So we can, maybe you can't see everybody, but join me in applause. Joseph's lecture was recorded. It will be available on the UCSC Arts Lectures and Entertainment YouTube channel on a day or two. For those who registered online, you should get a thank you email in a few days with the link. I'd also like to offer thanks to the staff of the Alumni Relations and Special Events offices who helped organize this webinar. Thank you to Shana, Diana, and Paulina, also to David Hansen, April Yee, and Anna Gurujan, who are co-organizers of this series. I'd also like to say hi to my parents in New Mexico, and happy birthday to my dad. It's his birthday, so I'll be calling him right after this. Our next Slugs and Steins will be on Monday, November 12th, featuring Professor Enrico Ramirez-Ruiz, the Vera Rubin Presidential Chair in Physics and Astronomy at UC Santa Cruz. As a theoretical astrophysicist, Ramirez-Ruiz studies violent astrophysical processes relating to the growth of substances on neutron stars and black holes. Ramirez-Ruiz's work also includes the use of computer models that simulate the death of stars. But I can promise you he's a very good lecturer. He's going to make this accessible to everybody. In 2009, Ramirez-Ruiz founded the Lamont Institute at UCSC to provide research opportunities in STEM for undergraduates who want to transfer to four-year universities and attend graduate school. In February 22, Ramirez-Ruiz received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring for creating the Lamont Institute and expanding research programs in STEM. If we're lucky, we may be able to hear from some of his undergraduate students, as well as Professor Ramirez-Ruiz himself. So stay tuned for that. We should be getting an invitation soon. Meanwhile, UCSC has other exciting events awaiting. You might be interested in tomorrow evening, October 15th at 5:30 p.m. It's the next event in the 2024 US Elections Forum series. It's called Moving Money and Moving Power. Philanthropy Isn't Neutral. This will be a special discussion led by UCSC politics alumna Carmen Rojas, PhD, President and CEO of the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Carmen will explore how philanthropy can shift social and economic power and the importance of values aligning grant making in creating a more inclusive future for all. You can attend this event in person or online. Also, this weekend is the Harvest Festival at the UCSC Farm, this Saturday, October 19th. This is a great opportunity to visit the farm for a day of fall activities, including food vendors and live music. And finally, on Wednesday, December 4th, join us for the next Crawl lecture in person in Santa Clara. It's called Sea Meets Stars, How Artificial Intelligence is accelerating the scientific pursuit. You can find information about these events and more at calendar.ucsc.edu. On behalf of the UC Santa Cruz Alumni Association, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you back next month at 6:30 Pacific for our next Slugs and Steins event. Thank you, everybody, and good night.